Good evening. I hope you're all doing well. Today we're learning Maseches Bava Daf Kuf Aleph. Tomorrow's shiur will be recorded and posted, and Tuesday still unknown, but Amir Tashem will be in person if I can swing it. We're starting at a new Mishnah on Kuf Amud Beis, and the Mishnah reads as follows. We've already seen this in another context, but the Mishnah writes, Hanosein Semer Letzaba V'Hikdichu Yora. If I give over wool to someone who's professional at dyeing wool, and the wool gets burnt on the pot, no lo dmeit simro. So then the person who's doing the dyeing, he did something wrong. So he has to pay the cost of the wool of mine that I gave him. I gave you $10 of wool. You ruined it. You owe me $10 of wool. Tzavo kaur. Let's say he already successfully dyed it. However, he did so in a poor way. We're going to see what the word kaur means. It's a bit of a unique word. We'll see what that means shortly. So then, im hashevach yeser al hayetzia. If it was dyed, and if the dyeing was good enough, the shevach is better than the cost, right? So it's an improvement. So then, no saying lo es hayetzia, then we pay the lower of those costs. If you did that to my well, I'd pay you the tzaba, the lower of the cost, because you should get a slap on the wrist. You did cut, or you did a poor job of dyeing. And if you did a really poor job and the cost of my items are still greater than the shevach, then no sin lo asa shevach, then we pay the tzaba, the lower of the two, whatever it is, because you did a bad job at your job. So we're gonna slap you on the wrist. Now let's say I gave you wool and litzboa lo edom utzvao shachor. I asked you to make it red, you made it black. Shachor it's utzvao edom. I asked you to make it black and you make it red. So then that's not good. Obviously, you mixed up your order with the other guy, but you messed up my wool. You dyed it the wrong color. So Rabbi Meir Omer no sin lo d'meit simro. Rabbi Meir says under those circumstances, the tzaba, the dyer, has to pay d'meit simro. He has to pay the cost of the wool. Rabbi Yehuda Omer im hashevach yeser al hayetzia no sin lo hayetzia. If the improvement is greater than the cost of the wool, then no sin lo hayetzia, that because he did a poor job, he made a mistake, we pay him the lower of the two. And v'im hayetzia yeser al shevach no sin lo shevach. And if the item was really so bad that the original item was still more than the increase, so then no sin lo shevach, we give him the lower of the two. Very good. Now, our Mishnah had used this language of ka'ur, my ka'ur. What does ka'ur mean? And the Gemara does something periodically that makes no sense to us because we don't speak their language. And the Gemara says, don't worry, Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabba Bar Barchana, kalbus, which we don't know what kalbus is. My kalbus, says the Gemara, thank you for nothing. Amar Rabba Bar Shmuel, kafra dudi. So what does this mean? Rashi explains what this means. Rashi says, Kineach bo es hayore. He took the wool and he wiped the inside of the pot. Now, if you've ever made noodles and there's like remnants of noodles on the pot, and you take the wool and so that it doesn't spread nicely. It's not like all the wool was saturated in liquid. It wasn't like that. Just the edges. It just wasn't done well. You did a garbage job of what you were supposed to do. The way that the wool soaks best is when you soak the wool inside a liquid in which the dye has been sitting for a long time. The water soaks up the dye. The wool soaks up the dye. Everything shalom Yisrael. But if you're a dyer and you do a terrible job at your job, you take the wool and you wipe the sides of the pot afterwards, it's going to look horrible. That's not a good job. So that's what the Gemara says is kafra dudi. That was the case of kalbus, which was the case of ka'ur in our Mishnah. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis have a brisa that's quite similar to our Mishnah. At the very top line of Kuf Aleph Amud Aleph, Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis teach us. Hanosin eitzim lecharash. Let's say that I give wood over to a carpenter, and I asked him la'asos mehen kisei. I said, "Can you please make me a chair? My kitchen chair is broken. Please make me a new one." And I come back a couple of days later. You say, "Phil, your order's ready." I show up, but v'asa mehen safsal. Turns out you made the wrong thing. You made me a bench for my yard, which I did not ask you for, or the reverse. Safsal v'asa mehen kisei. So says Rav Meir, well, because you did something real, you actually made a kinyan. And Rav Meir Omer, no sin lo d'mei eitzav. I have to pay you for the wood. You gave me $20 of wood. You made the wrong product. You owe me 20. What?
The craftsman pays the owner.
Yeah. Yeah, you're returning. Sorry. I have to clarify. Yes, correct. I don't even know what I am. I don't even know anymore. It doesn't matter. Yeah, in Daf Yomi, you got to be good with the pronouns. My apologies. So yes, that because I'm going to say I'm the one who gave the wood to you. So I spent $10 on wood. I handed you $10 wood. You made me the wrong product. You, the charash, you, the carpenter, have to pay me back. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, no. Im hashevach yeser al yitzia nosin lo yitzia, whatever is the lower of the two, either the shvach, the increase, or the cost of the item. V'im hayitzia yeser al hashevach nosin lo shevach. So that's whatever it is, he gets the lesser of the two. But Umode Rav Meir agrees in one case that im nosan eitzim lecharash la'asos min kisei no. I asked you to make a very high quality chair, one that would be equivalent to an $800 chair. I wanted you to do the very high level work. It's very interesting that the language here is a little bit different. L'chora, that is not meant to be, although the word ka'ur typically does mean like michoar, like disgusting.
That's the same word as the Mishnah.
The Mishnah had an aleph. The Mishnah had an aleph. That's what I was calling out. Yeah, that's what I was calling it. Yeah. I presume they're meant to be the same thing, but I don't know. I didn't do any research.
I don't know what the word means.
That was the chiddush of the Gemara to start with, which is that the word is a very weird word, and we just defined it as kafra dudi, which is a very unique word. But over here, the word ka'or could be different. It could just be it's mechor. You did a terrible job. I don't know. I didn't look.
I assume so.
Could be. But then I would have thought the same thing, that our mission should have been with an ayin. So I don't know. So let's say that I asked you to make a nice chair. I asked you to give me your A level chair. You gave me your C level chair. So then, or safsal nov asa safsal kor. I asked you to make a nice bench and you made a poor one. So then even here, I should say, over here, Rav Meir agrees that we give the slap on the wrist to the charash, and he gets the lower cost of the two. That if the shevach is greater than the yitzia, than the expense, then the charash has to pay back the expense. We always pay him back the lesser of the two as a slap on the wrist because he did a very poor job. So some slight distinctions between what the poor job means. Did you make the wrong item? Did you make the right item poorly? Okay, fine. This is a fascinating question, which I wouldn't have thought would have been a lumdisha question, but the Gemara gives a lot of attention to it. When I dye something, is the dye now part of the wool? Or is the dye a separate entity of the wool? It's visible. It's visible because before I dyed the wool red, it wasn't red. I can see the red, but it's kind of one and the same. So do we view them as separate entities, the initial wool and the dye? Is that separate, or are they, or is the dye no longer an entity anymore? It's just wool, right? Huh? The Gemara will raise your nakuda. That's correct. That's one sad. So yibayalahu yesh shvach samanim al hatsemer. Is there still a reality of the dye on the wool? Oh, ein shvach samanim al hatsemer. Or is there really no longer? It's batel. I'll use my own language. It's batel to the fabric. So I'm wearing a blue sweater. Is it a white sweater with blue ink? No, it's a blue sweater. You're not machalek. You wouldn't, if I stole your dye and I put it on my wool, so I ruined your dye, but Lemaisa, the sweater's blue now, right? So that's what the Gemara is asking, is do we treat them as separate entities? But before we try and answer that question, we're going to answer it toward the bottom, or at least try. But before we do that, we have to figure out what the case is. Hey, chidami. What is the case scenario where we're trying to figure out, maybe I should even say lemay nafkamina, as to whether or not the samanim are separate or not separate. So, ilema de gazal saman, and let's say that I'm a thief and I steal the dye, vidakin, who I grind it up because a lot of their dyes came from trees and bushes and leaves, and vitaranhu, with tuf and shin sharanhu, I soaked it, so I created the dye, vitsababahen, and then I dyed something, I dyed my own stuff with that. That case won't have a shaila on it. That won't be part of our chakira because I made a kinyan with the dyeing that I did. I made a shinui. I took the item from the street, from your yard, I should say. I took the items, I stole them, and I made them into something of my own. I made a kinyan. That can't be what our shaila is. Says Gemara, well, wait. No, maybe I stole an already made container of dye, so we would buy that in the store, right? Like it's like the ink from the printers. Now they sell them in liquid bottles, because I have that eco print thing in my house. They're great, much cheaper, by the way. So now I have much cheaper. So now I have a whole bottle of black dye, a whole bottle of magenta dye, and all the other colors. So what would be the case over there? Would we say yesh shevach samanim al gabe atzemer, that maybe the shevach is distinct from the tzemer? The amar le havli samnoi to shaklatinu. Give me the dye that you took from me. Oh, Dilmore, perhaps would we say ein shevach samanim al gabe atzemer, that really the shevach of the samanim and the wool are one and the same. The amar le, the guy would say back, leislach gabay v'lomidi. Your item is not distinct anymore. It's no longer separatable from what text was saying. Says Gemara, no, this can't be either, because let's just go for a moment with the following. We're halfway down on Kuf Aleph Amud Aleph. Let's say we assumed for a moment that Shevach is no longer distinct. Can I say that I don't have anything that's yours? I ruined your dye. You're right. Maybe you can even say that the sweater is blue instead of saying that there's wool with blue. Okay, but I still stole your dye. So you can't tell me that that's a case of leislach kabach v'lo midi. Nema, what I can say is Nema havli samnoi daf sadatinu. You stole my dye. I lost out $15 on the dye. Pay me back. So that can't be either. So we should take another approach in trying to understand the question of the Gemara. We would say, Ein shevach samanim al gabe atzemer uvoy shlumele. We would say maybe there's no distinction in regards to the color and the wool, and you owe me for that because you stole my dye. Or maybe we would say that the shevach samanim and the tzemer are different. I stole the dye. I added it to my sweater. Go take the blue out of the sweater. The Gemara says, shaklin hu? You want me to take the blue out of the sweater? B'mai shakle. What exactly do you want me to do? Bitzafon? You want me to use some type of detergent and try and extract it? Do you know what happens when I get a dot of bleach on one of these things? I throw it out and I get a new one because I can't find the blue that came out of the shirt. It's gone. Says the Gemara, tzafun, if you use detergent, you're 100% avure me'aver. The blue may come off and you'll be left with the original wool. But hashava lo avid, but I can't give it back to you because the detergent interacts with the blue in such a way where it is no longer. It's not like you're squeezing it out. It's a dye. So in order to get it out, the detergent ruins the blue when you take it out. So there's nothing to get back anymore. Rather, what must be the Gemara's chakira? We're 2/3, 3/4 of the way down, 5 lines before the white lines. Kigon. The gazal tzemer v'samonim dechad. I stole wool and dye from you. V'tzave le'ahu tzemer b'hanach simonim. And I dyed your wool with your tzemer. Your tzemer with your dye. I stole it. I stole your stuff and I dyed it for you. V'kamahadr le'nehale l'tzemer. And I gave it back to you. Now, do we say that really there's a difference between the dye that I gave you and the wool? And I gave you back both things. They're distinct. When I gave you the blue sweater, I stole your perfectly white wool, and I stole your blue dye, and I made you a blue sweater, and I stole it, and I put it back in your. Is that me giving back both? O Dilma, or perhaps ein shevach samanim al gabe tzemer v'tzemer mahaderle, but samanim la mahaderle. This is a great way to frame the question. I stole a perfectly white wool sweater, and then I dipped it in your perfectly blue dye, navy blue, and I take it out, I dry it off, I hang it back up in your closet. So you say, wait 1 second. Did you give me back the sweater with the dye, 2 distinct items, or no, because the blue is batel to the sweater, you still owe me the samanim? It's bedakus hachachma. We would outside, you'd never think of this. You'd never even ask this question out in the street. Gorgeous. It's just so subtle in regards to who owns what. Amre says the Gemara, tepukle, the aikar le nehale bidmei. Well, this case might be different because I can say that I increased the value of your item. So I wouldn't argue that I've kept your samanim and you have, no, your sweater's worth more now. Your sweater's worth more now. Says the Gemara, no, lo tzricha dezal tziva. Maybe it's lower with that color. Maybe you wanted a white sweater because that's why you bought a white sweater. I came in and sold it and dipped it into the blue vat. I lowered the cost of your sweater. There we can have a valid question. In such a case, we can say yes or no. Is the shvach part of the sweater? Is it not part of the sweater? Good. That's one approach. And hold on, because this is totally out of left field. Or perhaps kigon shetzava b'hu kofa. Oh, maybe the Gazlan took your dye and dyed the fur of a monkey. A kof. Oh, because that happens all the time. Absolutely. Says the Gemara. That's also a case scenario where we can say, is that mine or not? I want you to return my dye to me. I'm sorry, it's in the monkey. Is it separate of the monkey or is it part of it? So that's where we can have our chakira. That's the second possible answer. And the third possible answer, 3 lines into the wide lines, really, the wool belongs to one person, the dye belongs to another person, the ka'asi kof, and a monkey does the dyeing. You feel better now? Yeah, this is like a TV show, like a bad TV show, you know? Yeah. So the monkey takes one person's wool and another person's dye, and he dyes it. So here's what we want to know. Do we say yesh vach samanam al gabet semer, where I can say that they are distinct, that the samanim and the semer are different? Amar le havli samnoi de gabach ninhu, that your dye is in my your dye is in my shirt, right? Because they're owned by different people. Odilma ein shvach samanam al gabet semer. They're not distinct. I don't have anything of yours. So I'm wearing the blue sweater now, but the monkey did the work, not a person. The monkey did the work. So I have no kinyan in here because the monkey did the work. The monkey took the white sweater that belongs to you and dipped it in the blue that belongs to me. So you take your sweater, you're like, whose dye is this, right? So there, by the monkey, that the question actually clicks. The question actually works. And what we did with the kof is we removed the possibility of making a kinyan, which is how the question becomes valid. So let's try a couple of answers. Tashma, answer number 1. Let's talk about orla, fruits that are usher to be eaten in the first 3 years, and you use the peels of orla fruits to dye. You use it to make a dye. So it says the Gemara, Beged shetzivao beklipe orla. Let's say that my garment, my blue sweater, was created from a blue dye of an orla fruit or an orla branch. So there, yidlak, got to burn the sweater. Goodbye. Alma, what do we see from here? Chazusa milsahi, that the color is a reality, meaning that the blue in the sweater is distinct of the tzemer. We obviously, because we're forcing you to burn it. If it was one with the tzemer, so then we wouldn't force you to burn it because it's a sweater. But elamai, it must be that the chazusa, the appearance of the blue, the visual appearance of the blue is distinct of the sweater itself. And therefore, yidlak, if you dye a shirt with the peels of orla, because orla is usher to benefit from, as we will soon see. So therefore, it must be that the shvach samanin is distinct and different from the tzemer itself. Alma chazusa milsi, says the Gemara. Amar Rava, no. Hana hanir le'enaim asra Torah. Hana hanir le'enaim, in regards to orla, there's a very unique din that's seemingly only true by orla, that the appearance matters. In general, we wouldn't say that. We don't know what we would say, but you can't learn from orla because orla has a unique chiddush that appearance matters. Where do we see this? Because 5 lines from the bottom. Hana hanir le'enaim asra Torah d'tanya. The pasuk says, Arelim lo ye'achel, that that which is arel, that which is the first 3 years you're not allowed to eat. Ein li ela isra achila. I only know that you're not allowed to benefit from orla in the first 3 years for eating the food. How do we know you're not supposed to get any benefit from it? You shouldn't dye with the peels of orla fruits. Or you shouldn't use it as some type of fuel. Tamalomar, it's actually 2 different parts of the same pasuk, but Lamaisa, the drasha is that unique to the world of orla, there's an isser hana of the visual parts of it. So therefore, by orla, we know that we say that, but we can't extrapolate from orla to kolator kula to say that the chazusa, that the appearance matters, and therefore we don't have an answer to our question because it's only true by orla. The Gemara tries again with a very another equally unique area of halacha, which is shvi'is. So orla and shvi'is have a lot of similarities. Orla is inedible for that time. Shvi'is has some very unique halachos surrounding it, and says the Gemara as follows: Tashma, beged shetzavo beklipe shvi'is. Let's say that I had a perfectly white sweater, and it's now dyed in a blue ink from the peels of shvi'is fruits, different than orla. So what do we see? That chazusa matters. We see, we're on the very bottom line of Kufa Aleph Amud Aleph, we see that the appearance matters, and therefore, based on what we're seeing from this Bryce and Shvi'is, we would have assumed that there is a difference between the samonin, between the dye and the garment itself, and perhaps we treat them differently. Says the Gemara, no, you can't learn anything from Shvius. Shiny hasam damar kra tihye. The pasuk says in regards to Shvius, the pasuk says, where is it? Ki yovel hi kodesh tihye lachem min hasadeh behavyasa tehei. That it has to be in its particular original form, but not in any other form, and therefore you can learn nothing from the realms of Shvius, and therefore we don't have an answer to our question. We don't know if when, again, in the case of the monkey dyeing your sweater with my dye, if we view the dye as distinct of the sweater, we don't know. And as we turn to the top of Kuf Aleph Amud Beis, and we'll be going to the top line of Kuf Beis Amud Aleph, and then we'll stop. The Gemara says, Rava Rami. Rava asked a question on two seemingly contradicting sources. Number one, Beged Shetzavo Beklipe Orla Yidlak. We had said on the very bottom line, very bottom of Kuf Aleph Amud Aleph, that if a garment was dyed with the peels of orla, we said that it had to be burned. And Alma, what did that teach us? That at least in regards to the world of orla, Alma chazusa milsehi, that the appearance of the color itself was problematic. And we inferred from there that the samanim must therefore be distinct from the tzemer. What's the problem with this? Or minhi, we have another brisa. Reviz dam shenivla bebayis habayis tame. If there's a house that absorbed a revi'is of dam, of a mace, and the house is subject to tuma. The amrei lahabayis tahor. Some actually wrote this brisa that it was tahor, and there's actually no stira between these two. Velo pligi habakelim de havu meikara habakelim de asalibasof. When the blood falls out of the body, then anything in the house is tamei b'tumas oel, because the revi'is of dam is significant. However, once the blood absorbs into the carpet, so then new kalim that come into the house, no problem. Now, this is not where our question comes from. It comes from the continuation of the brisa, 5 lines down. Nivla biksus, if there is a garment that absorbs blood, then rowan. We take a look at the garment, and here's what we do. Im miskabeses haksus v'yotze mimena revi'is dam. If the garment which has absorbed blood, if when it would be laundered, a revi'is of blood could be wrung out of the garment, tmeya, that would create tuma. However, v'im lav tahora. What do we see about this blood that's absorbed in the garment? That it's distinct of the garment. We don't view them as one. So therefore, we have a stira that by the case of, what was the case we started with? By the klipe orla, the chazusa matters, and over here we see that the dam can be totally separated. Amar Rav Kahana, don't worry. Mikule revi'iyos shanukan bedam tvusa derabanan. Says the Gemara, there's actually a big leniency over here in regards to dam, as to why it would be distinct, and we come up with this leniency is because of dam tvusahi. Dam Tvusa, let's take a look at Rashi. Rashi is about 7 lines before the wide lines, a little bit more than halfway down. Rashi says, Dam Tvusa harug, a person was in the midst of dying by bleeding out. Sheyatza mimenu revi'is dam bechayav uvemoso. It's during that murky time when we're not sure if a person is alive or if they are dead. Suffix. We don't know. Safek kula bechayav, safek kula bemoso. So that blood had a unique din, no comparison to the previous case, therefore no question. And halfway down on Kuf Aleph Amud Beis, the Gemara says Rava Rami, that Rava raised another question. Tanan, we have a Mishnah. This Mishnah is in Maseches Shvius. Mimin hatzovin, there are different types of things that can create for dye. We have different types of growths and vegetation that can create dyes. Sefiche, the aftergrowth of satim v'kotze, different types of things that generate dye. Yeshlan shvius, they have a din of shvius, uladmein shvius, and their value would also be shvius. Yeshlan biur, uladmein biur, and they would all then be subject to the halachos of biur, which are special times when the food would have to be mevaer based on a whole bunch of other halachos that we're not going to discuss now. What do we see as an inference from this case? Alma eitzim yesh b'hem mishum kedusha shvius, that the wood or that the small branches that were part of the trees that were used for dyeing, that those are viewed as eitzim, yet at the very same time they have kedusha shvius. But the next brisa says the exact opposite about wood. So far we've said that eitzim that they have kedusha shvius. Urimini, but we have another brisa. Ale konim va'ale gefanim, if you have reeds or if you have grapevines, shegibivan bechaba al pnei hasadeh, that were collected for storage from the field. Chaba from like lehechabe is to hide something, so you're keeping them in storage. Liktan le'achila, If you gathered them to be consumed, yesh b'hem shum kedusha shvius, then we would say that it has kedusha shvius. But Rava says the rest of the brisa is very complicated for our previous marimakom. Le'etzim, if what's being gathered from the field is for wood, ein b'hem shum kedusha shvius. So what does that mean? That wood doesn't have kedusha shvius. So if you look at just the two lines, line number 1 is 6-7 lines from the bottom. It says alma eitzim yesh b'hem shum kedusha shvius. That's case 1. And 5 lines from the bottom it says le'eitzim ein b'hem shum kedusha shvius. So is there kedusha shvius by wood? Yes or no? So the Gemara teaches us a very important din when it comes to the world of shvius. Umeshani Amar Kra. The pasuk says in regard to shvius, vayisa shabbos haaretz lachem leochla. When does something have kedusha shvius? That's when the benefit of it and the consumption of it are at the same time. So if I'm eating a food, that's when the benefit and consumption happen at the same time. That's a din of kedusha shvius. However, yatu eitzim, but if I have firewood, so no, the benefit of the firewood is afterwards, right? It's not now. It's the heat. It's not the consumption. It's not happening as it lights. It's only after it is lit, and that's not exactly the same time. And therefore, we make a distinction between firewood and the wood that was being used for dye, because the second you drop the wood in for dye, the water changes colors. But the actual benefit of the fire is only when it's embers, not the initial moment. The fire doesn't get really hot until it's embers. There are some types of wood that have a lot of oil in them, and they're great for torches. The second you light them, Rambo, first blood, you light it right away, torch.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks, man. I'm here all day. Says the Gemara, there we should have said that type of wood has a din of kedusha shvius, because the wood is its biur. Says the Gemara, Amar Rava, you're right, but regular wood is typically for burning, and the geshmak of the fire is not the light. The geshmak of the fire is later down the road. It's when it's embers and when it's able to produce a lot of heat. We will stop right here. Pick up tomorrow, Mir Hashem, with Amar Rav Kahana on the top of Kuf Beis Amar Aleph. Of course, again, tomorrow, not in person, recorded and posted in Mir Hashem by mid-morning. And if not by mid-morning, then before shiur starts. Wishing you all a beautiful night.